Hey everyone, welcome to the Blue Mug Chat. A very happy Mahashivratri to all of you. May the positivity of today, may the positive vibrations of today reach all aspect of your life. So tell me, what does cultural identity actually mean to you? Please leave some comment on the comment section. I would love to hear your views on what cultural identity actually mean to you. Because in my opinion, it is the shared value that a living society shares in terms of your culture, in terms of your heritage, legacy, the food that you eat, the clothes that you wear, the festivals that you celebrate. And in turns, it kind of gives you the root, the foundation through which you can then, grow to branch out to whoever you want to be. Especially in this sweeping evolution that is actually sweeping the world in terms of globalization, I feel it has become extremely important to assimilate who we are as a culture, because unless and until we absorb within our core as to who we are, it'll be very difficult to accept the diversity that a globalization actually brings in. So today's conversation is all about legacy and how to preserve our culture, especially for the next generation. And I'm extremely honored to have the grandson of late His Highness Jayachamaraja Wadiyar, the last Maharaja of Mysore, and Maya Chandra, the filmmaker. So without further ado, I'm going to have them in the studio. I'll introduce you to all of them. And I also have two beautiful excerpts of the documentary that Maya Chandra has actually done for the Wadiyar royal family, which I'll be playing for the audience to give you the context of, so that it gives you some information of what it is that we are actually talking about today. So let me bring them over, let me introduce to them, and let's move on with the show. Hello, Mr. Vachas. Welcome to the Blue Mug Chat. So honored to have
Good
you.
evening. Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be with you all this evening. And wish you all, yourself especially, and all the viewers a happy Mahashivratri.
Yes, what a special day to do this special show. Actually, couldn't have been a better day, because they say the vibrations are very high in terms of gravity, in terms of energy. So let me introduce you, Mr. Vachas. Um, ML Vachusri Shrikanta, Siddhalinga Raje, as Mathadipati, Sri Mante Swami Pat Malavali, Adi Honaya Kanhalli, and Sri Kapadi Kshetra. Parents are Raja Se Vasundhirana Sardar M.R. Lakshminath Raje Ars and Maharaja Kumari Srimati Meenakshi Devyavaru, second daughter of His Highness Sri Jayachamaraja Wadiyar, Maharaja of Mysore. Mr. Varchas was born in 1981. He completed his schooling and graduation at Bangalore. He ascended the Gadige and inherited a 6th century old legacy and institution in the form of Monteswami Mutt, Malavilli, at the age of 14 after the demise of his father. The Mutt, a socio-religious institution, was founded by Shiva Sharna saint Monteswami around the 16th century CE. Today, it has a devotee base of over 5 million people. He completed his BA from National College, Jayanagar, and graduated in law from KLES Law College, Bangalore. After graduating in law, he practiced as an advocate at the law courts in Bangalore for 5 years from 2005 to 2010. He is a passionate naturalist and a keen wildlife photographer. He has initiated two major schemes, comprehensive rural development and development of government schools in villages by adopting them. In recognition of his contribution in preserving the Monteswami sect and the connected folk heritage, the followers of the sect have honored him with the title Abhinava Rachapaji. Rachapaji is a saint from the 16th century. So honored to have you with us, Mr. Vachas. Welcome again to the
Thank you so much, Chandra, for this. Yes, it's indeed a pleasure to be here.
I'm waiting for Maya to come to the studio. There she is. Hi, Maya. Welcome again to the
Hi. Hi, Sonal. Hi, Varchis. How are you?
Hi, Maya. Good evening.
Hi.
So moving ahead with the conversation, what do I see here? Mr. Virtues, the Wadiyar dynasty ruled the kingdom of Mysore from 1399 to about 1950. And in between, there was a Muslim commander, Hyder Ali, and then his son Tipu Sultan, who invaded. And then the British invasion happened. So, could you tell us a little bit about the history and the legacy of the Wadiyar Mysore royal family?
Yes. So yes, as you rightly said, we trace back our heritage to 1399. This was when the two young princes from Dwaraka rode down south. This is Yaduraya and Krishna. They came down south searching for a suitable place. I mean, they had a vision of Shakti temple, Pita, under which there was a kingdom, and they wanted to come down to in search of the location. So the legend says that after traveling through the entire subcontinent, they come down across the Kaveri and reach the foothills of the Chamudi Hills. Mahabala was what it was called earlier. And when they reached there, they got to know about there being some distress in the local area where the then chieftain Chamaraya had died, and the commander in chief Maranayaka was trying to usurp his principality and was forcing the queen to give the daughter in marriage as well as in alliance. And there was one Jangama saint who came and asked the young princess to help the queen in distress, and so they did. I mean, they eventually killed Maranayaka, saved the queen, and the princess was very much like a fairy tale. It started, and the princess was given in alliance, and the queen also gave them the power to rule over the particular principality. And from those 16 villages back in 1399, Mysore grew to be probably one of the most well recognized states internationally by the time it became a part of the Union of India in 1947 or there around. So in between 550 years is quite a bit of uh, ups and downs that one can imagine. We've seen the last 70 odd years of India itself, what all has happened in the country. So when you magnify it almost tenfolds is what probably Mysore history comes out with. Uh, the earlier part of history, the records which are available are from inscriptions as elsewhere. And so there's not too much which is written down, but with what we have available, uh, it was traced back from by some well-known historians in the 17th and 18th century. So there, Yaduraya was the first king, and thereafter the next important period in Mysore was in early 1600. And this was when Vijayanagar Empire was losing its steam and control over parts of southern India. And the then King Rajawadiya the first, he assumed charge, and he's also one of the person who initially broke away from being a feudatory to become an independent king himself. And the fabled Dasara, which we see in Mysore today, credit goes to him that he was the first one to celebrate it back in 1610 in the month of September. Uh, and this was again a tradition which started, I mean, during the Vedic and the Puranic times, but well documented in the Vijayanagar Empire. The Navami festivals were given a lot of significance, and this was a time when in Vijayanagar, where the entire armies were paraded, and all the feudatory alliances were made and forged, and their respects were given to the emperor of the kingdom. the Vijayadashami celebrations had a lot of the Dasara celebrations had a lot of importance, and so it was. Today it's more of cultural, but at that time it had military significance. It showed the power that a ruler had over his subjects. So what started in 1610 by Raja Wadiyar continues till date in Mysore. It was with the royal family still plays an important role where all the important cultural aspects, the heritage, the rituals, ceremonies are all still conducted unbroken in the palace, though more of a private affair. And the state conducts a bigger celebration outside the main palace where you have thousands and thousands of people coming from across the globe to be part of that celebration. Now, going back to Raja Wadiyar, so he expanded the territory of Mysore and was a well-known warrior and a very pious king, they say. And the lot of reforms they brought in during his period. And thereafter, you have uh, Kantira Narsaraja Wadiyar, who came in, and then Chikkadeva Raja Wadiyar. So during these two reigns, again, Mysore grew exponentially. I mean, you had Bangalore also, which became part of Mysore, and the kingdom of Mysore. And we went all the way down to Tiruchinappalli, and up north we went probably close to Shimoga and all those regions. In fact, Chikkadeva Raja Wadiyar is one of the few people who even has faced battle with Shivaji as per records. And he got a title, Apratama Veera, undisputed ruler or king, because he stood ground and defended his kingdom and protected Srirangpatna at that point in time. Uh, During again the reigns of Chikkadeva Raja Wadiyar and Ranadira Kantirava, there are a lot of reforms which were brought in. The law and order situation in the state improved quite a bit. Administration, good able administration, which was structured, was again made available to the people. Good tax reforms, and the country prospered at that point in time, Mysore. Thereafter, there was a period where we probably went a little down, and this was again in the 18th century, mid 18th century, when the Dalawais, I think, tried to take control of ruling the kingdom from the king. Though the king was the titular ruler, you had Dalawais like prime ministers and chief ministers who tried to control what would happen in the state. And at that point in time was when you had the two ruler, I mean the army commander in chief was Hyder, who took control around that period, and he was also known to be a great warrior, as what we have seen in so many records. Uh, Thereafter, it was his son Tipu Sultan till 1799. He had complete control of Mysore. Once they were defeated, the kingdom was restored back to the Wadiyar dynasty. So the family continued to uh, be the titular head. So even during the time when you had Hyder and Tipu being there, the family, though they were in almost in exile, I mean they were imprisoned. I mean they were all put into in like house arrest during the entire period, and they fought their little wars, probably Douglas wars also you could say, and they were given back the kingdom in 1799 by the British. Uh, uh, Krishna Raja Wadiyar III, who came in 1799 as a young boy of 4 or 5 years when he was anointed as the Maharaja. So I would say the golden modern period of Mysore probably started from his period, because his contribution in art, literature, architecture is without parallel. Probably, if you see in the history of Southern India, or even in particular Mysore, he devoted a lot of time. Uh, to all these aspects, and a lot of temples which were built during his time, rather renovated and included. Then his literary works, again, as I said, were numerous. The art of the playing cards and all what we see, the Ganjifa card, and a lot of other games were introduced during his time. Uh, the art, Mysore traditional art, what we see today, also was given a lot of importance, and rather probably I would say it was born during his period, during his reign, and he gave a lot of importance to documenting what happened around him at that point in time. There was also probably a slip on one end where the administration of the state probably faced a bit of issues during his reign, and the British came back in the later part in the 1830s and took direct control of the kingdom through a commissioner. So you had a period where the you had a British resident and the commissioner who ruled Mysore. 1881, we had the rendition, and again, this actually is an important, according to me, period where today when we see so many, across the globe, we see so many wars happening and fights happening. So this little battle, which was fought by Krishnaraja Wadiyar III to get back the rights to his family to rule, was again, as I mentioned earlier, a bloodless war. Though it did not have all the aspects of fighting and in terms of a physical fight or armies going and capturing, it was more of how we fight today in courts. So he made out a very strong case for himself and his kingdom, and the British government eventually agreed to it. And his son, the one who succeeded him, Chamaraja the 10th,
Yeah.
was given back complete control of his kingdom. And it's during the period of Chamaraja the 10th that you saw the representative of people. So the seeds of democracy, what we have today, the seeds of democracy were planted back during the time of Chamaraj Wadiyar the 10th itself, where you had People's Representative Assembly in the late 19th century, and he ruled for a very short period. He died early at a very young age, and his son, Krishna Wadiyar the Fourth, is one of the most well-known rulers of Mysore. He's also famously called as Rajashri by Mahatma Gandhi, comparing him to Lord Rama himself. And the state of Mysore then was compared to Ramarajya, and said that the ideal state was something which
Okay.
probably Mysore was. And the contribution of Narwadi, you probably need to have a few more chats for us to, have a detailed view into his contributions. But in every sphere that you could possibly think of, whether it's education, childcare, medical care, women's rights, reservation to the downtrodden, socially backward communities, industrialization, agriculture, I mean, any area you would want to pick, received a lot of encouragement from his end. And his worthy successor was Jayachamaraja Wadiyar. And I'm proud to say that I'm his grandson. And his contribution, again, is something which cannot be covered that easily. And like he had large shoes to fill into, and which I must say there's no one else who could have probably filled in the area which was left vacant by the earlier Maharaja. And he ruled Mysore for a short period as a monarch. But he also played an important role in modern day India. I mean, when unification, the process of unification. In fact, Mysore state was one of the first states which readily accepted to be part of the dominion of India. And
Okay.
he also extended a lot of support to Sardar Patel then in trying to get the other states also to be part of the concept of the union, which was then still in its nascent stage. And he's continued to contribute to the state even after giving up his kingship. He was the Raja Pramukh till 1955, and later he was the governor for the state of Karnataka, Mysore then, and Karnataka later, and also of Tamil Nadu. And 1968, thereafter, he took a backseat and did not participate actively in public life. But his contributions during that phase, again, is enormous. Music was one thing which he's very well known for globally, and literature, obviously, philosophy, wildlife conservation. He was the founder chairman of the National Board for Wildlife in the early 50s, and contribution of the Wadiyars through and through has been enormous, and I think it's important that a lot of us today in today's fast world we tend to forget what's happened in the past. I've in fact been asked a lot of questions as to why does Bangalore have a palace? Why does your family have a palace in Bangalore? And so I mean, they were like, no, but you people are from Mysore. You're the rulers of Mysore. So I had to explain to them that Mysore state is not just the city, but it encompassed almost 60% of what Karnataka state is today, or even more probably. And so these are a few things where today's generation don't see the connect with the past. And I mean, yes. So just try to give you a bird's eye view of history of the family.
Yeah. Thank you. I just want to play a small excerpt which will actually show the glimpse of the palace life inside. So I'm just going to show that before we move on with the show. I think the audience will enjoy that. Just give me a second.
Shri Jayachamundige Shri Jayachamendra Shri Jayachamundige Shri Jayachamendra Namankita Bhumindra Lalamana Mudade Namankita Bhumindra Lalamana Mudade Kayau Shri Gauri Karunalahari.
Okay. That was, thank you, Maya, for sharing that excerpt.
That certainly gives you goosebumps, isn't it?
Yeah.
True.
Just a
That
glimpse of,
people of Mysore, old Mysore, and this region. This is something, when you see it, I don't know, for me, I get goosebumps and I get tears in my eyes. Because this was a dynasty that was, I don't know, exemplary is a very small word for this. We have lessons to learn from this dynasty, right from governance, music, scholarship, philosophy, management. There are so many things, Sonal. It's not so easy to, just, quantify them at all. And this, for example, the song that you heard was the Mysore anthem, which was, conceptualized during the period of Jayachamaraja Wadiyar the 10th. And that era was, as early as that, they conceptualized an anthem song for a state, and it was composed by the best musicians. And a very lovely historical anecdote about the song where even Rabindranath Tagore was inspired by this song. And he composed the famous Anandamayo, that song based on the same raga. And in fact, the same raga goes for our national anthem, Janaganamana.
Acha.
And that's how the influence of what was happening in Mysore at that time was far-reaching. It was not so simple. And, these are the stories that need to come out because I feel these are the stories that will inspire the generation of today, make us feel more patriotic about what we should respect as Indians, and how we should feel patriotic about the dynasties, the history, the culture that was set forth by our kings and the kingdoms. And this is a very small anecdote that I would like to share. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Actually, it gives the context to the video, to the excerpt that. Also, Maya, you are doing a series of podcasts called King's Speak, right? Which are the speeches from His Highness Jayachamaraja Wadiyar, which has been narrated by son-in-law Sri Raja Chandraji, right? So,
Yes,
what
yes.
compelled you to do the podcast about the King's Speech? What is so? There must be something very compelling for a filmmaker to actually do a podcast on based on speeches. So, could you share the some of the the main content of the speech, or what attracted you to do it actually?
Yeah, see, basically, I've been studying about the Wadiyar dynasty, and there's still so much more to do. So, when I was going through the speeches of these kings, there is so much of profundity in those speeches, be it the way the language is written, the meaning, the context, and the message it was giving to the citizens of that era. There was a lot of, meaning that I wanted to bring out and share with the rest of the world. And the speeches were so beautifully done those days. They were written so well. The language was so good. The meaning was brilliant. In the way it was communicated to the audience with which it was intended, that speech. So I thought the best way to do this was to bring it out in the form of podcasts where people could listen to this and understand our legacy, understand from where we are coming from, and understanding that those days itself, there were things like this going on. And you see speeches today, it's a little different, isn't it? But there's so much more to learn from this. And when I was talking to Rajaji about this, and I told him he would be the best person to narrate the speech, and why can't he just read it? But then he came up with a brilliant idea. He said, no, let's not just do the reading of the speeches, but you give an introduction to the context of the speech, and that makes it more meaningful. So, for example, the podcast 2 has a speech on to addressing to the joint legislature of the assembly, the two houses, which Mr. Vachas had mentioned was formed by the previous Maharaja, very, very early, the Maharaja Chamraja Wadiyar the 10th, where the two houses were formed, which is the basis of the democratic governance. And when Jayachamaraja Wadiyar addressed the two houses, we wanted to bring in this context of how democratic governance was actually a forethought in the way the Wadiyars were ruling the kingdom. And it was already well established at that time in their minds. And they set it into practice. It was not just that they were talking about it, but they set it into practice, a democratic governance. And that's how we gave an introduction. We both worked on the introduction for a long period of time. In fact, Raja uncle was supposed to be here, and I think he's been busy, but you must get him on the show sometime. And he's a thorough walking, talking encyclopedia, okay, of the history of the Wadiyars. And he and me worked on the introduction, and I did the introduction, and he did the reading of the speech. So we are 2 episodes down now, 2 major speeches we have put in. The first we started with the coronation speech. Yeah, they're published on Podbean. Yeah, they're published on Podbean, and it goes by the name of The King Speaks. Yeah, I think we needed to create more awareness around it, which we will start doing now. And while we were doing that, we hit the Dasara period, and that's when I got Mr. Vachas to do a piece on what was it like to celebrate Dasara inside the palace, because none of us can ever. Yeah. So that was the. Yes, yes. And that's how the podcast really started, because reading of speeches, I mean, it's a very good medium. It's a very good content for a podcast. And that's how we started it. And we intend to go on further, because there are so many speeches of just the last Maharaja. Then there is Nalvadi Krishnaraja Wadiyar, and then there was Kantirva Narsimharaja Wadiyar. All their speeches are absolutely brilliant, and they need to come out to the youngsters of today.
Yeah, so whoever the viewers who are watching, please listen to these. They have a lot of value addition in the way that we live our lives, because like Maya explained, there is only so much we can cover in this live platform. So whatever has been shared, I'm trying to bring forth. But anyway, talking about Dashera, Dashera was started by the Wadiyar royal family in the 17th century, and it has since been going on for the last 4 centuries. So, what is so significant about Dashera, and how did it all come together to become what it is in today's context?
Going back to the very concept of India itself, as we say that it's the diversity which best describes her, and it's the numerous cultures, the language, the practices that have made India what she is, and it's one of the most ancient cultures you can probably come across. The celebrations in Mysore, as I earlier did mention, started in 1610 by Raja Wadiyar. So these were the celebrations which were continued from the Vijayanagar Empire. But the very basis of celebration of Dasara go back to the Vedic and the Puranic age, and where all the scriptures speak about the significance of the celebrations per se. Here in Mysore, there were a few additions which were probably made in later, like they say the Khas Darbar or the Darbar which takes place, were certain additions which came in at a later part in time, probably during the period of Shahjahan the Third or somewhere around then. But the main celebrations which started off in Vijayanagar continued through to Mysore and continues till date unbroken. Uh, in Mysore, I mean, for a king, it's the people. What connects the king to his people is the divinity which surrounds kinship. And the family, our family, has always been ardent devotees of the Shakti Devate, and even follow as the final aspects of Shaivism and Vaishnavism, both. I mean, it's not only that, I mean, to some extent, you can say we are quite a secular platform where we did not discredit or disregard any other communities or religions which came up in the areas of Mysore. And if you probably visit Mysore today, I think that's quite evident. You have the most beautiful church constructed there. You have some amazing mosques which are there, and probably the best temples you can see in southern part of India. Uh, Here again, the celebrations in Mysore. After till the 50s, it had a different what do you say, color to it. I mean, it was the ruler, the monarch, who came out and participated in an event where he could meet his people and show the how progressive the state was. And people from it was a state celebration. The entire state came together to celebrate Mahanavami. And then after the 50s, uh, when the last Maharaja was still there, it continued with the same, what do you say, the same sagacity and the pomp and pageantry continued, I mean, to the later days. But after the 70s, there was this period where, Privy Purse was taken away, and there were few issues which agreements which were there between the state and central government, or rather the princes and the government, were taken away, and which caused a bit of what do you say, felt a feeling of betrayal at some point in time, you can say. And the video which Maya had made for the family, where you had the small clipping of Jayachamaraja Wadiyar coming in, and this was during that period, because if you noticed, he did not get onto the throne. He places a sword onto the throne and then sits on another chair kept near the throne. pays his respects to the throne and walks away. In fact, for people from that era, this was one of the most sites which many people couldn't take. Seeing that person who has given so much eventually was still not taken care of well. Then it was my in the video you also see a young boy who was sitting next to my uncle. Sitting next to my grandfather. That's my uncle, Mr. Chandra Wadiyar. So he took up the task after my grandfather passed away in '74 to continue this tradition. And till he was there 2013, he along with my aunt Pramoda Devi both ensured that the celebrations, and also obviously my grandmother, she was there till 1982. She was obviously holding the pivotal role then, and so the tradition continued. The family supported them in whichever way we could be part of the celebrations. And any celebration, I think it draws its significance when you have a group of people who assemble, and especially if it's your family, and the exchanges, the colors you bring in, the vibrancy you bring in, the food, the sight, smells, music, then the practices, the rituals and ceremonies attached to it. So this all comes together, and Mysore, it continues to be like that. So even today, if someone goes to Mysore for Dasara, you get a sense of how it was probably hundreds of years ago, and even you literally time travel to the past and see what all happened then, and it's an experience which continues to enthrall all of us to be a part of being part of the family. And today it has taken a completely a more global perspective and role, where the celebrations are not limited within the fort of the palace. They are celebrations which are beyond it. So there is a lot of cultural activities. There's sports which are associated with Mysore, like wrestling and all that, which are given a lot of prominence. Then you have the culinary aspect of it. So you have stalls put up by local people where they bring in the local flavors out. And Mysore is something else. I mean, the entire it's a living. It's what do you say? It's like a person. When you go there, you see the vibrancy. You use. It's not limited to the palace, as I said. You go to the market. You go to the streets of Mysore. There's from a street vendor to the palace, everything is festivities. So that continued, and it's grown. As I told you, though it's different from what it used to be, I think anyone who comes to Mysore will never go back, being dissatisfied or anything. That they're going to go back with a lot of things to talk about. And yes, the other aspect would be that what we learned being members of the family, the the respect, mutual respect, which comes through interaction, and how we treat our elders, and the respect we show them, and a lot of give and take, bonding, and ensuring that the legacy continues, and even our children are made aware of what has been the past, the practices, and how important it is, and the reasons for it to be carried forward. Yes, so Dasra has been a significant celebration, continues to be, and I'm sure it will be in the future as well, till all of us are there. Yes.
I'm going to play that excerpt again, which actually, it was a beautiful excerpt. Maya, thanks again for sharing it. That actually shows the little Dashera celebration within the palace was. And this one.
Dasara in Mysore has a recorded history of over 4 centuries. It was first celebrated in the kingdom of Mysore during the reign of Raja Wadiyar in the 17th century. The Wadiyars of Mysore have carried forward the tradition and have preserved the sacred practice all these years, more so significant now under the new order where kingship no longer exists. Today, Mysore Dasara is celebrated as a state festival and is a global spectacle. I'm fortunate to be born into the family which has preserved this rich cultural legacy and heritage. My mother, late Maharaja Kumari Srimati Meenakshi Devi Avaru, was the second daughter of late Maharaja Shri Jayachamaraja Wadiyar, the last ruler of the Kingdom of Mysore.
What a beautiful video, actually. We can't do justice to it, obviously, in such a short duration, because that in itself is a movie. You know, it's so beautifully done. Actually, look at you look at the colors, look at the tradition, look at the like. Why are you not on mute? Sorry, you can unmute yourself now.
See, actually, when we were doing this, there's still a long, this is a long podcast. And what just goes into the depths of the explanation in terms of how it was, the experience was inside the palace during those 10 days of Dasra. You know, it is 10 days of absolute, amazement that you will, when you listen to the podcast, it's absolutely wonderful. And I think this is the first ever podcast that brings out how the event was celebrated, how the 10 days was celebrated inside the palace. And never before have common citizens like me ever know what goes on inside. And it's wonderful that Mr. Varchas was able to collaborate on this, share those lovely pictures, and that just shows how open this is to, for him to bring it out to the world. And I was really blessed to get all those pictures and put this podcast together. And it's a 40-minute podcast actually, and one should listen to it. We will be uploading it soon. We are just finishing that. And in the same way, his two other aunts also speak about the Dasara festivities inside the palace and how they experienced it as children. And those are also wonderful memories that kind of connect you back to this legacy, connect you back to the culture that we are all growing up in. It's so important for the youngsters to listen to this.
Is this, from what I understand, is this open to the common man?
Not inside the palace. I think Mr. Varchas will explain that.
Here, the celebrations, rather the rituals and ceremonies which are celebrated within the palace, is a private affair today. And for obvious reasons, we won't be able to accommodate.
Yeah, absolutely. Security as well, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But there's certain parts of it which are visible. Like, say, for example, the 9th day and the 10th day, when you do the Aida Puja. Early morning, we
your volume is a bit low.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Mr. Varchas.
Yeah.
Yes. Better.
Yeah, so
Better.
the 2 days out of the 10 days, the 9th and the 10th day, they are parts outside. Yeah, so the parts of the celebration also come outside the main complex. So you have the Aida, which is sent for certain worship and pujas on both the days, and where people can actually see the celebrations and witness it. But the rituals which go on within the palace complex, like in the puja room and all the other things associated, like even the caste darbar ceremony, which continues to be performed, all these are only for a very limited set of people, probably our friends and family. But mostly it's just the family in all these celebrations. Yes, and anything further?
Mr. Varchas, when you were talking about, when you were actually describing the Dashera and the heritage, one thing that you talked about was preserving the legacy within the coming generations. And I can see that that could be a challenge even within the family as the generations, because the globalization is hitting every aspect and everybody, be it royalty or the common man. how do you ensure that within your own lineage that you preserve the legacy, because what you have is something so precious that it has to be preserved, right? So I feel royalty has all the more responsibility to ensure that they pass on that value system to the next generation. So does it feel like a challenge, or how do you do it?
I think it starts with appreciating what you have, and getting involved with your own family in terms of understanding uh, why certain things are celebrated, or how significance of each of the events that do take place. So obviously you need to appreciate it, and first accept that you want to be part of it. And here, though we are speaking about royal legacy, but I feel it's with every single family, because we all only look at the documentary part of it. I mean, where someone documents a particular uh, happening or event, or there is a some form of written exchange. But we forget our grandmother's stories, and which I feel is also extremely important. The stories which we've heard from our parents, our grandparents, our uncles and aunts, and so all these are also important sources of our legacy, our heritage, which can only be uh, transferred from one to the other through dialogue, through involvement and exchange. So here, it is important today that we need to connect with what is our identity, and when we I mean what makes uh, an Indian, or a Mysorean, or a person of this particular family, a person of that family. So it's the practices, it's the rituals, it's everything that goes around is what forms that particular family, that particular individual. If we do not preserve it, if we do not appreciate it, if we do not understand it, and take it forward, after probably a generation, it will be lost. And today, all the more with such a fast-paced life, where you want to look at what you can get easily and be done with, where you instead of sitting down and having dinner, you would rather pick some sandwich up and watch television. I mean, so it's just you and your own world, where the families had before, somewhere maybe getting lost. So these aspects have to be preserved, and it's every individual, howsoever big or small, in any framework, whether it's a family, whether it's a community, or probably a locality, a state, village, country, wherever it may be. That it's these individuals who have to come together, pass on, and preserve what is theirs. It is important, and I think I also would like to thank Maya for the effort that she's put in the last few years about in the sphere of at least bringing out our family matters into the forefront. Again, here I should mention, like I think earlier Maya did mention about Raja uncle, and he's my mom's brother-in-law, and he's encyclopedia of history and the tradition, especially not only limited to the Wadiyars of Mysore, but to everything that has transpired within that period globally as well. And the amount of information he has, you probably wouldn't even find it in a public library. And so we need people like him to come speak out more, and give youngsters like us an opportunity also to capture it and preserve it in our own ways and means. And yes, so it
I
is
would love to
important that
connect.
we.
Yeah, you have to convince
If
him,
he's
Sonal.
listening,
He's
I would
very
love to
shy.
connect.
But he's
Yes.
a storehouse. I'm telling you,
If
he's a
he's listening,
storehouse of knowledge.
yeah, I've heard so
He's a
much about
storehouse
him
of
that
knowledge.
now I ought to have him on the Blue Mug chat.
Yes, you
So,
have to.
Maya, as a filmmaker, like as a filmmaker, what is your take on the dwindling heritage and the culture and to preserve and share that with the next generation? How do you see it?
See, it is extremely crucial, especially in these present days, where I think a lot of patriotism can be built into our younger generation by documenting legacies and by making them hear and see and read about what a great culture that we all come from. And I think it's very, very important that these get documented in whatever ways. It could be films, could be podcasts, could be a web series, books. Books are rarely read today, so podcasts, audiobooks, these are all the things that we must deploy new age technology and convert that to make these stories more meaningful to them and reach them in the simplest way possible and make them understand that this strong legacy is our roots, and most of us need these roots to build a better India and to build a better nation and to be more patriotic, first of all, in a way. So I'm so happy and privileged that I could be associated with both Raja Uncle and Mr. Vachas and the families who have been so very generously supporting me in this effort. And we have a few other topics on mind that we are going to be starting soon. And I'm hoping to keep this tempo up and move it further and further with them. And I'm really, really blessed. I think I'm blessed that they're able to share so much with me and we are able to do this together.
And to just to add to that, with this globalization, there is also this concept of being a global citizen, which in itself is a beautiful concept, and I completely align with that concept also. But I think even for us to be global citizens, first we have to know where our roots are. Unless and until you have your culture and your roots and your foundation set up, you cannot be a global citizen. So a lot of times
Yes.
people have this concept in themselves saying, "Oh, but we are global citizens." Absolutely, it's wonderful to be global citizens, but first you have to be completely tied on to some root and then spread out your branches and wherever
Yes.
it is that you want to grow. That's a better
Absolutely.
way to grow into way, and there's so much to offer now. And there is so much that we are exposed to. The next generation is exposed to. If only they would
Yes.
understand our heritage and our culture is equally important. Mr. Vachas,
Absolutely.
I would like you to pass a message to the coming generation. Because coming from you, because I also feel that you are on that other spectrum where you are the royalty, right? So what is the one message that you would like to give out to the next generation, being aligned with what we're talking about?
Well, I think one of the most important things is learning to respect your elders and trying to the very delicate fabric of family has to be preserved. And we all grew up in houses which numbered uh, uh, 30, 40 people or 50 people, and that was the size of families. And now we've all come down to single digits, one or two people, and even smaller. So how do we reconnect? How do we, get back to being part of the larger family? And that's something which I think all of us have to look into. And I would request all of you. First thing is, yes, respect your elders, respect all around you, and let's work together to make this place a better place to live in. And hopefully, what I think one thing we should understand is we're custodians of our legacy, our past, and it's important that this gets carried forward by the future generation. So, what best we can do to ensure that this continues is something which we should all focus on.
Yes.
And how, because
Absolutely.
whether it's royalty or whether it's just a little house, everything is equally important. And let's hope for the best and all the best to everybody.
Yes. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just going to quickly read out a few comments. Jitendra Bhai is here. Thank you, Jitendra Bhai. Thank you, Alia. Thank you, Atul. They are all lot of comments here. And So there is one comment by Jiten Singh Ji Gaikwad. Virtuous ML Ers, fondly known as the Prince, is an accomplished royal. The Prince who was to be the king, so well groomed and so well cultured. I learned history of Mysore from the son-in-law of Maharaja Jayachamaraja Wadiyar, and he is the virtual encyclopedia on Mysore, Hukum Raja Chandra ji. That's his comment. So many beautiful comments. Thank you, Mr. Virtuous. Thank you, Maya, for being on the show. It was
Thank
a
you.
lovely,
Thank you.
very insightful show, and I hope the message goes across because that's one of the reasons we have this platform. And on that note, thank you again. Completely
Thank you.
Honored to have you on my show. Yeah,
Thank you, Sunal. Thank you for
this-
having us.
Giving us an opportunity and a platform. Thank you.
Yes. At least we are able to reach
Totally
out our
happy.
message to more people through you. And we hope that more and more people subscribe to our podcast. And we're looking forward to taking this to greater heights to reach out to more people. And we need support from people like you to reach this out. Thanks, Sonal. Thank you for making us part
Absolutely.
of this. Thank you. Good
Thank you.
evening.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Just so
Happy
much. Good evening.
Shivratri. God bless you all. Thank you.